in the comics world?
Well, breaking into comics is about as easy as breaking into becoming a movie star or a rock star. Only it never pays as much when you make it. But it's the same thing. It's a job that everybody wants to do, but very few are qualified to do. And there's only so much room. So it's very competitive. It's very hard to get in there. I started. The way I got myself noticed was I did a small indie comic myself, independent book called Crazy Mary. And it was just a 12-page script. I did it for free, which is, you're not going to get paid your first time. And it caught the attention of an editor at IDW. And it wasn't by coincidence. I took this comic and when we got our copies, made sure it was on the desk of every editor out there. Like, I literally mailed out 200 copies of this to everybody in the industry. Look what I did, And eventually, the idea for doing that was we wanted to get the book picked up by somebody else. We wanted Crazy Mary. We wanted Marvel to publish Crazy Mary. That didn't happen. But IDW saw it and said, well, it's a great book and everything. We're not looking to publish a new book. But we like the art. And we're looking for a guy to do CSI New York. And they wanted to do an adaptation of a television show called CSI New York. And they liked the way I drew faces. So they said, we'll hire him for that. And I said, sorry to the writer I work with, but I'm taking this job. And that's the short story, how I broke in. But I mean, I spent years trying to break in. I spent years doing portfolio reviews, going to comic conventions, talking to editors, writing letters, sending my samples. But it was really that one book, self-published, that got the attention, and I got my first job. And right after that, I was worried I would never get work again, and Peter David saw the work I did on Crazy Mary and CSI New York, and he was doing a book called Fallen Angel that used to be at DC Comics that was coming to IDW. So he needed a new artist, and he saw that and said, we'll take this guy. So I got lucky. I got lucky. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been doing Fallen Angel for almost 5 years now, off and on. At first as an actual series for 3 years, and now as a mini-series that comes out every once in a while. And from that time, I've since done X-Men Origin Beast, a bunch of Star Trek books. Everything kind of branches out for that. But it all starts with your first book. You got to get that first one out there, and then you got to not screw up after that.
Let's go with the second one. Was any comic an inspiration to you?
Oh, there were lots. I mean, all comics were an inspiration to me. I mean, that's I was especially like around between 10 and 13 years old. That's all I cared about was comics. And mostly it was the old John Byrne X-Men's, John Byrne Claremont back in those days. I was just amazed by that stuff. I wanted to be John Byrne for the longest time. Then I discovered Moon Knight, and it was drawn by some guy I never heard of, whose name I couldn't pronounce, and I later found out it was Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, this is some really cool stuff, because he, as much as I love John Byrne, he did stuff other comic artists weren't doing, And it was my first introduction to that kind of work. You could do more with the art than what was previously told, and you could do more. It's going to sound sacrilegious, but you can do more than just what Kirby does. You can do something a little more artistic. And about 3 years later, he did a book called Stray Toasters. It was produced by Epic, and I was just blown away by that, because he wasn't just drawing comics in pen and ink anymore. He was painting. He was using photographs. He was using all kinds of whatever. It was like a walk through a museum looking at this comic, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to paint, because I had always been interested in painting, but there was no room for it in comics, so I thought. But after seeing that, and this was still in the 80s when it wasn't that common, so I would probably have to say, if there was one comic that influenced me the most, it was probably Stray Toasters. Yeah. And I love his work on New Mutants as well, his early 80s stuff. agree.
So the third one. Who are your favorite artists?
That's tough. I mean, obviously Sienkiewicz, because I just spent all that time praising him. He's very important to me to this day. In fact, his work, he's one of the few artists whose work keeps getting better. Alex Ross was a big influence because of the work. He did very photorealistic painting, and I was like, wow, if you can do. Normally, that kind of work was only on covers, that photorealistic stuff. And I saw him, all of a sudden, Superman and Batman and the Flash and the Justice League was real, like the way he painted it. And I was like, I want to do that with everything I did. So he was a big influence. John Byrne, of course, when I was a child, was what got me into this in the first place. And Perez, George Perez stuff, like when I was a kid, he was doing Teen Titans, and he does like so much detail and spends hours on every panel. It's incredible stuff. Mobius, when I discovered him, I was like, because I wasn't, being a young American, I was into all the American artists, and then as I became a teenager and a little more sophisticated, I started seeking out other stuff, and that's when I discovered Epic, which was a line of Marvel, and that's where I learned of Mobius and his stuff. Same with Sienkiewicz. I had never seen something like that before. So that was a big influence on me too. I can probably talk forever about the artists because there's so many that influenced me, even outside of comics. Robert Williams, H.R. Giger, Picasso was a big influence, just because when I first learned about him, I was during the Blue period. I was just looking at that stuff, and I discovered Cubism, and I was like, that's weird, and then that got me into surrealism, and then it just started growing more and more. And those artists were important because they took me out of just comics, and I started learning more about the art world in general. And then as I did that, I tried to bring that back into comics.
Which one of your comics is your favorite?
Which ones I own or which ones I've done? Because I own a lot of comics.
Second one.
Okay. That's a loaded question. With I own like thousands. Probably not counting what I'm working on right now, which is a great thrill. Probably Fallen Angel. I've had the most fun with because I got to work with Peter David from the ground up. I mean, he had done it before with David Lopez at DC Comics, but when we started at IDW doing Fallen Angel, we were recreating the whole mythos, starting from the beginning, retelling the origin, and I felt like I was there from the ground up. I redefined the look of the city, to a lesser extent the characters. So when I work on that book, I feel like I have complete freedom. Me and Peter both see eye to eye. We both understand each other. We both understand what the book needs and what it wants. So if I could work on that book for the rest of my life, I would. And I am still working on it. It's miniseries from time to time. That being said, I get a great thrill on doing Star Trek books. Whenever I get to, because I'm a big fan, I grew up watching Star Trek. I can quote lines from the movie verbatim. Also, what I'm doing right now, what just recently got announced, is I'm doing a Doctor Who, which I'm also a big fan of, a Doctor Who Star Trek Next Generation crossover, which is going to be incredible. That's a huge thrill. Yeah. But I would say Fallen Angel. If I had to pick one, I would say Fallen Angel. But you know what? X-Men Origins Beast was kind of fun to work on too, because ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of working on the X-Men. I told you about John Byrne, how and I finally got an X-Men book to work on. But okay, I just gave you 4 answers, and you wanted 1. Fallen Angel. But plus Star Trek plus.
Okay, next one. What character would you like to work with?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's also like a big convoluted answer. You just want one word, and I'm going to be like, I don't know. There's too many. It's hard to nail it down. What I would love to do is take the character of Jude from Fallen Angel, who's my favorite character, and do his own miniseries and have it be all about him. Because Fallen Angel is very much, it's an ensemble story. It's a bunch of people. It's not really, even though it's called Fallen Angel and Leandro, the main character, is the Fallen Angel, it's really about the whole city and all the characters. And everybody's kind of sharing the stage. I would love to see them take Jude out of that and give him his own 4-issue miniseries. You know, like they did with Wolverine in the first Frank Miller one. I would love to see them do that with that character because I think he would really shine on his own, the same way Wolverine did back in the 80s when he had his own book, you know. So I guess if I had to pick, I'd say Jude, but there's a million other characters I want to work with, but I would say Jude from Fallen Angel, which is a character. Right now, like anybody's listening to this is like, Jude, who's that? You know, like, he's the one I want to work with. Yes.
Next one. What's your favorite all ages comic?
All ages. Probably, and you're gonna laugh, but the new Sonic the Hedgehog stuff that they're doing, it's because it's surprisingly good. I mean, it's definitely all ages, and it's definitely if you look at it just from the surface, it's a child's comic, but it gets very much into the mythos the same way the comics did it in the Silver Age when Kirby first started doing the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and stuff. There's a big story behind it, and if you pay attention, you can catch it and get kind of sucked into it in the same way a soap opera will do that, you know. And yeah, I would say Sonic the Hedgehog. I know it sounds crazy. I know it's a character based on a video game. It's silly, but it's actually really good stuff. And
I love this character too. When I was a child, so I loved some,
Yeah, it's great stuff.
So, and the last one. What comic or story would you like to create or recreate?
Pause this. It's going to take a while. There's so much I would love to. I mean, that's like that other question, like what character? It's like I want to get my hands on everything. Okay, here's a project I want to create because I'm constantly doing pitches all the time, and I've got like 10 pitches out there to different editors right now. But the project I really would love to do is a crossover between Star Wars and Star Trek. I would love to make that happen, and I came up with this concept that the Borg are trying to, they get caught in a vortex or something, and they end up in a different dimension in another galaxy. Say, I don't know, a galaxy far, far away, long, long time ago, and they end up, in the Star Wars world. And here are the Borg, and they're trying to assimilate, and they assimilate the whole Empire, and they get to Vader, and because he's so strong in the Force, they can't assimilate him. He ends up assimilating them, and takes over the Borg, and then the Borg become stormtroopers with lightsabers for arms, just wreak havoc all over the place. That's the story I want to do. That would be fun. Call it the Borg Troopers or something.
So it's hard to see because there's so many fans with Star Trek who hates the Star Wars fans,
Well, I think that's very short-sighted because I like both. I love Star Wars and I like Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek's clearly more intelligent, but it's okay. Did I just pick a side? I meant sophisticated. I mean, better.
Oh, sorry.
No, but I mean, I like them both. I think lots of people like them both. I love Star Wars. May the Force be with you.
Next one. What are the steps you follow at the time to draw?
What's that?
What are the steps? Different steps.
Oh, okay. You want to know the process? Yeah. Okay. Generally, what I do, it depends on the kind of work I do, but let's talk about like the sketches that I was doing tonight and that kind of stuff. I usually start, obviously you start with the pencil drawing, and I just do like they do in classic figure drawing. You kind of outline the skeleton, try to get your pose, and then fill that in, and get as much detail as you can in pencil, but not too much. Go in. Then you pick your light source. if the light's coming from here, if it's from behind, where you want it. And you drop in your shadows. So if the light's coming from the side, you go to this side of the character and you just, it's almost like sculpting in your mind. You try to imagine the dimension of the character and then just blacken everything where the light wouldn't hit with solid blacks. Then I come in later and I dilute the ink a little bit with water so it's not as dark, and then go in and do the midtones, so it's like a semi-shadow, and then just leaving the highlights white on the paper. It's pretty much that simple.
I guess it's very difficult to recreate from your mind to the...
You have to have a strong imagination. Like you have to be able to well, not even a strong imagination. You have to be able to hold an image in your head, because we can all. I mean, I believe anybody could draw if they could just hold the image still in their mind long enough. You know, because you know what things look like. You go through life looking at stuff. You know, you can imagine things. When you dream, you clearly see everything. So you can, if you can do that, you can put it on paper. I think the hardest part for me anyways, is to hold the image in my head while I'm drawing it. To remember the light's coming from this way, the perspective is this, to not change that in your head. So that's why I kind of do it in steps like that, where I pencil it first, and then I pick the light source, and I come in and drop in the shadows, just to get that down as quickly as possible before I lose it,
So let's finish it. So the last one, could you dedicate a few words for the club?
I'm sorry, which club? Oh, yes. I love Club Spider-Man. It's my oh, wait. It's not like those Batman people. Oh, let me tell you something about Club Batman. I'll say I discovered Club Batman from it was from Facebook, I believe. That's where I met the two of you online. Yeah. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, isn't this, because there's lots of clubs dedicated to different properties, different characters and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, it's another one of those clubs. And I really didn't give it much thought at first. And then I come back, every once in a while, and you guys are, very active on there. And then soon I start seeing, Norm Brayfogle and all these, like, big names like James Olvar. And Club Batman is, actually impressed me enough that I'm here. Club Batman is, when you first see, something like this, you don't give it much thought because there are so many. But you guys definitely stand above the rest. I love Club Batman.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me out here. These guys brought me to Malaga.